The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast. For our listeners who are new and this is your first episode, hang on, because as you listen through the entire episode, we go from small talk and getting to know the person to digging deep all along the way when you don't even expect it, with powerful life truths that are going to help you and I grow and just get to that next level with peace and joy. So in this episode, you're going to hear us talk about the weather to start, which is unusual, but we did because it was just fun. And then we get into this guest's story and we go through her childhood and we go into the teenage years, and nothing's really super out of the ordinary. It's a story you've heard before. But then today's guest talks about how she is now an author, an entrepreneur. She has her own television show. She has a podcast. She has her own ministry. But the gap between who she was and who she is far and wide in between. So we get to listen to this week's guest journey. We get to learn about how we can stop making excuses in our lives, how we can become entrepreneurs, and how we can start exercising our kingdom authority. Truly, all this and more stretched through the episode. So get your pens and paper ready. Be ready to listen with an open mind and heart. And then more than anything, after you hear this great content, apply it to life. Repeat it each day so you can have a great life in this world and more than anything in eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. I can't wait to hear from you, whether it's how we can help you or just to hear your success story or maybe even a prayer request. But when you're done listening to this episode, I hope and my prayer is that it's a catalyst for positive change in your life. So ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're about to hear the Shayna Rattler story. Hey, Shayna, how are you today?
I am grateful. How are you?
I'm thankful, actually. I'm same as you, man. Grateful and thankful. We were just talking off camera, and our listeners are going to hear this a few months from now, but we are recording this on July 25th. And where are you located and how hot is it today?
I'm in Dallas, Texas, and for the last week, the temperature has been around 110 and the heat index has been around 115 or 117 every day for about 10 days.
That, ladies and gentlemen, we have listeners in over 105 countries around the globe, and I don't care where you're from, that's hot. There's people in the Middle East, 140 degrees, but whew. Now, what's it do at night? Does it drop down cold or does it stay up?
No, I mean, if it gets down to 88, 89, I went to a birthday party about a week ago. It was 9:30 on a Friday night and the temperature was still 99.
Man.
And the index was still above 100 and it was dark outside, 9:30 p.m.
Wow. So we, ladies and gentlemen, did not come here today. As you heard in the intro, you heard all about Shayna and just bits and pieces of what we're going to talk about today. But I was shocked when I heard how hot it was where she lives in Texas right now. And it's a freak thing. This isn't normal, correct?
You know, one of the things, and I was talking about this with some of my church members after church yesterday, is that those of us that are I'm not from Texas, but those of us that have lived in Texas any amount of time, we recognize that it's always been hot, but we were discussing the fact that this feels like a different type of heat, not necessarily hotter temperature or degrees wise, but it just feels like a different type of heat. And I don't know if that has anything to do with climate change. I don't know if somebody's manipulating the climate. I don't really know what's going on, but it really is a different type of heat, even though I've been here 7 years and it's always been hot.
Yeah, and I bet there is some truth to that. There's so many things going on in our world, and there's so many diabolical things going on in the world. So who knows? It really it could be anything from the COVID to the COVID vaccine to Bill Gates buying millions of acres to do diabolical things. Who
Yeah.
knows? But right now, we're going to focus on you, your story. We're going to start at birth. We're going to go all the way through chronologically to where you are today. And then we're going to transition from you helping us to where are you going next, Shayna, and how can we help you get there? Sound good?
Absolutely. I love it.
Awesome. So you said you're not originally from Texas.
I'm not.
Where are you originally from? What was your home like life? Parents, family, brothers, sisters, good, bad, ugly childhood. So
Yeah.
let's start there.
So I was born in Jacksonville, Illinois. Most people, unless you're from Central Illinois, you have no idea that there's a Jacksonville outside of Jacksonville, Florida. But I was born in Jacksonville, Illinois. It's Central Illinois. It's agricultural area. And nobody that plans to do anything beyond high school has a reason to stay in Jacksonville, Illinois, because unless you're a farmer or you're a family with the last name of Grosjean, there's really absolutely nothing in Jacksonville, Illinois. I was telling someone yesterday that as a teenager, we literally had nothing to do but do things that we probably had no business doing. I could remember some Friday nights, and thank God that there's a statute of limitations and I can't get arrested for this story. But we would actually go hang out underneath viaducts at night in high school, probably 16, 17 years old. And when the ice in our beer cooler would melt, David, we would open up the little plug on the side of our cooler, let the water run down, and we would sit on the lid of the cooler and ride down the viaduct. Like that's literally the type of stuff that we had to do to have fun in Jacksonville, Illinois, because there was absolutely nothing there. I was raised by a great family. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, who was extremely uneducated, yet extremely wise. And I credit her a lot for the wisdom that I feel that I have today as an adult. I come from a biracial family. So my mother is white, my dad is Black. Fortunately for me, I never felt like I had an identity crisis. I've heard a lot of, mixed people say I was never white enough for the white people. I was never Black enough for the Black people. Well, fortunately for me, I was always popular. I grew up middle class. I don't have the fortune, the unfortunate story of like growing up in a van down by the river and being molested and abandoned. And I don't say that to make light of the people who have, but I have a great childhood. I was encouraged to do whatever I wanted to do and, be whatever it is that I wanted to be, even though I knew that I was going to have to leave Jacksonville, Illinois in order to do it.
That's awesome. And for those of you watching the podcast via YouTube, if you saw me smile when she mentioned the van by the river, it wasn't because like Shayna, I wasn't making fun of anybody in that scenario, but I remembered the Chris Farley skit from Saturday Night Live. And if you've ever seen that, it's hilarious. But if you wondered why in a serious moment I was laughing, that's it. So have you seen that, Shayna?
I haven't, but it makes me want to go look at it.
Oh, I will put in the show notes and send it to you. It's a classic Chris Farley skit, and they did it several weeks, different episodes. He lives in a van by the river, and he's a motivational speaker that tells people why they should pay attention in school and work hard because
I love it.
It's first class stuff. So anyways, okay. So your childhood, you were in a community that there wasn't a lot to do. You had good parents, though, good family. You said you spent a lot of time with your grandmother who just oozed wisdom and godliness. And so through your childhood, was there anything significant in your growth and development that you want to discuss before we move on to your teen years and college?
I don't know if there was any significant big period in time or a notable event, that happened in my childhood. But I just remember always feeling extremely supported. I never did everything right. I was always, talking when I didn't have any business talking. I think there was something to be said for that because now I get paid to talk. But I can just always remember feeling extremely supported by everyone, in my family, whether it was, my dad tells me or told me, I actually just buried my dad a couple of months ago, but he tells me that I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And I can go back and look at pictures of where I was having a yard sale where there was nothing on that table but junk that nobody would have wanted. And I'm sure if anybody bought it, it was probably him. But he never said, nobody's going to want this junk. He supported me in that. And so I would say that that was the most significant thing that I can recall from my childhood is just being overly supportive or supported.
And did you recognize that? Like when you were younger, maybe not to the degree, but did you recognize my family's there for me? They have my back. They love me.
Absolutely. I'm sure at that age it was probably more at a subconscious level, than it is, being able to look back. Hindsight is 2020. There's a lot of stories I tell about my childhood and how my purpose has left clues all throughout my childhood. And when I look back at each of those moments, I can look back at specific areas of support that I gained during my family during each of those pivotal moments in my life.
Awesome. Then, so now let's talk about you become a teenager. You said you were popular, bored out of your mind at times, but where's your life go from there, Shayna?
Yeah, so one of the very first clues that my purpose left for me was at the beginning of my teenage years. I was a volunteer in the activities department at a nursing home. And my dad tells me that I took this very seriously. I would tell him, I can't be late for work. And he'd be like, you don't get paid to go to this job. But one of the things that I really loved is that instead of being in the dining hall calling out the letters for bingo, I love to go into this woman's room who had a condition that if they moved her, they would kill her. She had so much excess water in her brain. Her head was like this big. And I would go into her room and I would ask her, if you could leave this room, where would you go or what would you do? And I would go back and I would find books that described what she said she would do or where she said she would go. And I would go and I would read those books to her. And it just gave me, so much immense joy for me to feel like I was, helping her dreams to become true. And, as we talk about different levels throughout my life, you will recognize that although my assignment has changed over the years, that my purpose has remained the same and consistent throughout all of my life, from my preteen years up to where I am now in my mid 40s.
That's awesome. That's excellent. And it's good you recognize and separate, we all have a purpose and we have the vision, but the mission changes because
Yeah.
once you complete a mission, you move on to the next mission, right?
And that's one of the things that I hope your listeners recognize is, let me just teach this really quickly. There's a difference between assignment, calling, purpose, and destiny. And I hear people interchange those four words as if they mean the same thing. So your assignment is who you help. And that can potentially change with the seasons. Those assignments, they expire. And many of us, we need to give ourselves permission to let go of an assignment that is expired. Your calling is how you help the people that you're assigned to. So maybe you preach, maybe you teach, maybe you speak, maybe you're a coach. It's what you do to help the people that you're assigned to. Your purpose is why you're here. It's the impact that you have with the people that you're assigned to. And your destiny is where your purpose takes you. So yes, my assignment has changed, but my purpose has always been, if I look back from my preteen years to where I'm at, to where I'm going, my purpose has always been to help people's dreams become a reality. And I think it's important that we use that context for this conversation, because people say it all the time. My purpose, my calling, my assignment, my destiny, all of those things are great, but they don't mean the same thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. If you actually checked out my website right now, I use a little bit of different phraseology, but it's those same four things put into the About Us page in drop downs. And I think what you're saying is completely biblical based. So,
Yeah,
and all of us have the same purpose, and the bottom line is to glorify God and to tell people about him. So that's a given, right?
absolutely.
But you're right. So many people overlook it and get confused, use the words interchangeably, and they are different. So when you're working in this nursing home, you have this beautiful idea to ask a woman where she wants to go who can't travel, and you help her go there.
Yeah.
Where did someone teach you that? Did you figure it out on your own? Is it something God put in your heart? Because that's a really wise and caring thing to do for anyone, let alone a teenager.
Yeah, I think, David, like some things are taught and other things are caught. And I think so much of my life has just been caught. I told you my grandmother, she was wise, but she was uneducated. My father was educated, but nobody in my entire family is gifted in the areas that I'm gifted. Very few, if any of them, know the things I know or have gone down the path that I've gone down. But I've always been told all my life that I've been wise beyond my years. I have an old soul, or the old folks used to say, this child, I think she's been here before. So it's just kind of intuitive. I believe that it's the way that I'm wired. I believe that many of the areas that I am gifted in are just areas that I've just been fortunate enough to, those things are just planted in me and they just come out of me. So it was almost like I didn't know anything else to talk about. Like, well, dang, because she would say, like, well, I can't leave this room. I can't do anything. I can't remember the last time I've been out of this room. And it was just a natural extension for me to say, well, where would you go if you could? I don't know how eloquently I said it at that time, but yeah, it was just kind of planted in me, and people that I know, and even when I look back at my life, they just go, I don't know where this stuff comes from, other
Yeah.
than simply a gift.
But for everyone listening, myself included, if there's someone who is bedridden, that's a great idea. And if there's someone who's still alive listening to our voices and you feel like you don't have anything to do, there's always something you can share with others. There's always a phone you can pick up. There's always some contribution you still have left to the world, or God would have taken us home. But
Right.
for you, Shayna, to be able to pick up on that at 15, that's just remarkable in itself.
Yeah.
So,
And I was probably more like 12.
oh wow,
And
that's
I'm probably being conservative. I don't even know that I was completely a teenager. I've asked my dad, like, if he can remember exactly how old I was. And he says he definitely knows that I wasn't driving age because he knows where we lived. So I may have been 12, like whatever the youngest age is that they would even let you do something like that. I was probably 12 at best, no more than 13 for sure.
and then so where does your life go from here? You're volunteering at the nursing home, and what happens next?
Yeah. So in high school, I was a rebel. I, I've always been the kid that's been very difficult to understand because if you looked at the left side of my report card, I always had straight A's. My brother and I are very, very intelligent. We don't have to try. We could literally sit in class with our eyes closed, our ears stopped up, and sing la, 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 and get straight A's. But then if you looked at the right side of my report card, my conduct was horrible. So I was always getting in trouble for talking. I was always doing something I didn't have any business doing. The very last full day of school of my senior year of high school, I had spent weeks orchestrating the biggest food fight ever known to Jacksonville High School. So as a teenager, I was a hellion, to the point that my dad said that he told himself, my dad raised me, I primarily lived with my father from the age of about 7 on. And he said he used to tell himself, if I can just get her out of high school, I will consider it. So my teenage years, I told somebody the other day, and they're like, "Oh, I don't believe it because you're so sweet." I'm like, "Yeah, that's because you see the Jesus girl. You know, I bet you that there's going to be a person that's probably going to bring me on like Maury Povich or like Jerry Springer or something and say, 'You ruined my life,' and I've had low self-esteem." Now, I wasn't doing some of the bullying like we know of today. I wasn't doing mean things, but I would do things that were, probably made them feel horrible. Like there was a girl by the name of Megan. I won't say her last name, but she would walk past me in the hallway and I would literally like jump on her back on top of her backpack and like ride her down the down the hallway. Like it's horrible, some of the things that I did as a teenager. So I was not a model citizen for, it's like I was a model citizen in my tween years, and then in my teen years, I was an absolute hellion. I did some of everything.
And then where does that go as you got into your 20s? Did you go to the workforce? Did you go to college? And then
I
when did you start changing?
I did. So I got pregnant with my son the summer before my freshman year of high school, of college, sorry.
Of
And so
college.
at this point, it was like in my mind, I always knew that I was going to do great things. I always knew that I was going to go to college. I just was doing stuff. I had a psychiatrist one time, a psychologist rather, that my dad took me to my senior year of high school. And they basically said, there's nothing wrong with her other than she knows whatever she gets herself into, you'll get her out of. Like, that was the shortest. I don't think we ever went back after that. They're like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your daughter other than she knows that you'll get her out of anything she gets herself into. So even though I was doing all of these crazy things, I still had great plans for my life. I still knew that I was going to go to college. So I was actually accepted and had plans to go away to a 4-year college. And I found out I was pregnant with my son right around Labor Day, right before I was supposed to go away to school. So I ended up staying at home. I didn't live in Jacksonville anymore, in Illinois anymore. I at least moved to Springfield. And I went to community college. I didn't miss any school the entire time that I was pregnant with my son. I went to summer school every summer. I didn't miss a semester. And I went to community college until I matriculated into physical therapy school in my early 20s.
Awesome. And by being pregnant you were late teens, but you're still a teenager, did that help calm the wild, or were you still wild and rebellious?
Yeah, I think by the time I got pregnant, I wasn't wild and rebellious, other than the fact that I was with a man that was, older than me. That was probably the only last rebellion. But I was always so wise beyond my years that I've always instilled date men, that are older than myself. But by this time I wasn't doing anything crazy and wild. And I was with someone that was older than myself and out of school. So I wasn't doing anything crazy and wild at that point. I was, working full time, going to school full time. And, by the time my son came along, it was just kind of like, just keep going. It wasn't like a what next at that point. It was like, I'm not going to let this slow me down. I personally think that people that say, oh, well, I never did this and I never did that because I had a child, I just think that's a sexy excuse for what you chose not to apply yourself to. And I don't apologize if that hurts somebody's feelings, but I think that it can slow you down because it took me 8 years to get a 4-year degree. But anybody that says what they didn't do because of something like a child or whatever excuse you fill in the blank, I think it's just that. I think it's an excuse that you say to make yourself feel better for what you didn't do.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's make that one of the main talking points. Ben Franklin has that quote that the man, meaning mankind, that's good at making excuses is usually good at nothing else in life.
That's right.
So you talk about a hammer, right? That convicts me. So I'm just like, all of us make excuses at times, but I find myself, I either am in hyper work mode or let's just chill and smoke a cigar mode. I mean, there's really
No
no
in
in between.
between.
Yeah, no, I've always struggled with that. So I'm harder on myself than anybody else. But for the people out there who make excuses, they have the mindset of the victim. There's people who just don't even realize they're doing it, but they are in a hard life situation, but they're accepting what society says that, oh, this is the best you can do. This is as far as you can go. Oh, you can't go to school full time, work full time, and have a child. What practical steps do you have for them to start breaking out of this model of mindset?
Great question. So two things. Number one, I would say that recognizing that there's a difference between reasons and excuses. I learned this quickly as a therapist. There were some patients that I had that just didn't want to do their exercises, didn't want to participate in therapy because they just didn't want to do it. And so the stuff they came up with was an excuse. Oh, I've got a hangnail. But then there were other times that there were reasons, like my heart is racing so fast, or I'm in 12 out of 10 pain. So if you have a reason in your life, like I said at the beginning of the episode, that it's only been a couple of months since I buried my father. Well, there was a reason why I had to cancel a couple of things that were on my schedule. But an excuse is, I just don't feel like it. An excuse is you would go to work if you had this same thing occurring, or you would do whatever is important to you if you have this same thing that's occurring. But for whatever this thing is right now that's clearly not as important to you, you're using that for your justification of not honoring your commitments. The second thing I would say is that all of the examples that you just gave, David, is being shoulded on, SHOULD. And sometimes we should on ourselves, and other people who have great intentions for our lives should on us. You should just continue to be a therapist, because after all, that's what you went to school for, and that's what you have the student debt for. You should focus on your family and get your kids out of the house before you start this business. And like I said, people that should on us have great intentions for our lives, but it's usually either horrible advice, or they're giving us advice in an area that they have no reference point, and so that advice is usually very valid. So I would tell you to ask yourself, are you making an excuse, or is it a real reason? And then, are you shooting on yourself, or are you allowing someone else to shoot on yourself? And then ask yourself, whatever the answer is to those two questions, how do I move forward anyhow? Because
Yeah.
I want the devil to say, oh crap, she's up, because I'm going to do whatever I can every day to at least take a small step towards what it is that I say I want, regardless of what's going on in my life.
Yeah. And I think one thing, I don't know if you think this way, because some people are just, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and some people are more wired driven. And for me, like I said, I'll go up and down. But one thing that always helped me is we all have 24 hours.
Yeah.
So when you see these super high achieving, successful people, quote unquote, successful people, like you got like Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart, and you got these people like Elon Musk that run like 5 globally, like go to space companies, right?
Yeah.
They
At
all
one
have the
time.
same. Yeah. At one time, they all have the same 24 hours, and there's always a give and take. Like, if you're one side or the other side, it's still crazy. You got to find balance. A false balance is abomination to the Lord. But whenever I'm like in that mode of, oh, I got too much to do, and that's total sarcasm if you didn't pick up on it and you're listening, but it's always like, no, there's 24 hours and there's people killing it right now. So I can too. Let's do this. So are you wired that way naturally? Is that your first thought? Or what do you think if you do get in a hole to get yourself out?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I would say the majority of me, it is a wiring, but I'm human, right? So there are some things that knock me down. There are some things that frustrate me. There are times where I just don't feel like it. And I give myself, depending on the severity of what it is that I'm dealing with myself, I give myself anywhere from an hour to a day to feel the emotions. Because I think sometimes we can be so driven, we can be so alpha, that we just plow through and we never honor the emotions that we're feeling. We completely negate them and suppress them, and it's going to bubble up at some point, and then something is going to suffer because of it. So I try not to be like, oh, I'm just going to ignore everything that's happening in my life and everything I'm feeling and just plow through because Elon Musk is doing it. I say, no, you know what? I want to honor what it is that I'm feeling right now. I want to experience what it is that I'm feeling now, and decide, why am I feeling this? What am I supposed to learn from it? What am I supposed to do? But I'm not going to be talking about it a week later. Like I said, I give myself anywhere from an hour to a day, depending on the severity. And then it's like, listen, who cares, right? Like, I had a girlfriend one time that her niece was in and out of, she was like running away and being put in like not drug rehab, but like counseling or whatever. And I asked her one day, I said, what was one of the biggest things that you learned? She said that most people don't care about your problems. The utility company and the mortgage company doesn't care about your problems. You're not going to be able to say to them, I didn't pay my bills because my mom wasn't a good mother. So she said, so we were taught, how do you push through what it is that you're going through, despite what it is that you're going through. So give yourself the time to feel the feels so that it doesn't sabotage you or your success down the road. But don't give yourself very long. Eventually, you've got to get up, put it behind you, because nobody cares. And again, I don't say that to diminish what it is that you're feeling, but I do want you to recognize that you don't have permission to stay there. I think it's disrespectful to God to stay there.
Yeah, it's a hard lesson, and it's something that sometimes we fall into that trap, or we've learned it by watching our parents or those close to us. But it is a whole, one way or another, we have to figure out how to get out of. I couldn't agree more. So now you're 20 years old, in your 20s, you're moving through physical therapy school. You have a beautiful boy. Where does life go from there?
Say that my 20s were pretty smooth sailing, pretty common. I was doing the things that people in their 20s do. In my early 20s, I, you know, did the club scene, because by this time, when I was 21 and my son was 17 months old, I had moved to Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm now not in Podunk, Illinois anymore. I'm now not in an area that doesn't, have a lot of things to do. So I'm in Memphis, Tennessee now. I'm 21 years old. I I'm going out, I'm having a good time, living my best life. I don't think we had that terminology back then, but looking back, I can say, living my best life. Still, by this time, I'm in therapy school. I and at this point in my life, probably 22 to 24 is when I start getting introduced to personal development. And I fought it in the beginning because I'm such a type A, speak to the results, get to the results type of person, that I discounted the importance of personal development. I was the one that would go to a weekend conference to learn how to sell or how to have a podcast. And that first day when they're like, let's get grounded and see the light. And I was like, this is dumb. Like on the sales page, it said that I was going to learn how to triple my income. I was going to learn how to bring in high paying clients. And we just spent the first half of the day cutting out pictures and, talking about what we want and why we want it. Like, I don't care about any of this crap. Just get to what's going to make me the money. And, I had to learn the hard way that the personal development or the soft skills is what actually enhances and makes the hard skills possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't like any of that crap.
Yeah, I'm not a touchy-feely. Yeah, the froofy stuff, the touchy-feely, to me, it's just false advertisement. I think you should be prepared. You should have an agenda. We should go through it. And if I need somebody to massage my head, I'll hire somebody locally to do that. I don't need you to do it to me in Texas or in Vegas or in California. Just cut to the chase, right?
Yeah. But I realized that there were parts of that. And some of that I learned later, not to, as a Christian, not to subscribe to it at all, because it was really far-fetched and a little bit demonic. But there were parts of it that I do think that we should pay attention to. Like, some of the exercises that they took us through, like, getting clear on what we want and why we want it, and, making sure that we don't have any excess baggage that could actually be preventing us from having what it is that we say we want to have. Those things are important, but I didn't want to hear it because I was there for a reason. And they didn't start off by explaining, we're going to get to what you came here for, but these are the things that keep most people stuck. These are the things that prevent the how-to, because what we know by now is that if the how-to was all there was to it, we'd all be rich, right? And so they would have prefaced it by saying, this is kind of the foundation that we got to make sure there's nothing that's going to get in the way of the stuff that we're going to teach on day 2. I probably would have trusted the process a little bit more. And I now have learned that there is some things that we really do need to pay attention to on the personal development side in order to enhance the professional development side. But I had to learn some of that stuff kind of the hard way. So that was kind of what my 20s, began to look like.
All right. And then where did that bring you in your 30s?
Well, you notice I haven't mentioned Jesus in any of this, but yet I'm the founder of a God Shift. So in my mid 20s was when I started going to church. I first started going to church in my mid 20s because my son stayed with my godmother on Saturday nights. And the only way that she would agree to keep him on Saturday nights was if I agreed to come to church on Sunday. So the only reason that I went to church on Sunday was because that was what was going to be my ticket to go into the club on Saturday night. But when I got in my mid 20s, I met a young lady on one of the jobs that I was working at, that there was just something about her that I couldn't explain, but I knew I loved it and I knew I wanted it. And so she asked me to come to church with her one Sunday. And I've never been adverse, to going to church. I didn't grow up in church, and we'll kind of talk when we get into more of my calling of, kind of how I disqualified myself because of that. But, I went to church a little bit as a teenager, but it was always because I was spending the night with a friend or whatever. It wasn't because that's what we did a lot of, in my own home. But she invited me to go to church with her one Sunday, and I went. And when I started to notice some of the characteristics of the people around her, I realized they were the same characteristics that I noticed on her. And still at that point, I wasn't enlightened enough to know that it was the God that was in them I just recognized like, hey, there's really something about these people that I love, and it's something that I want to embody, myself. So in my mid 20s was
And by
when
the just for our listeners, we have listeners from all cultures, all nations, all worldviews and backgrounds. What were some of the specific characteristics like goodness, kindness, faithfulness? What were the
yeah,
things you were
like
seeing?
just nice and happy all the time and not complaining, and just a joy about them that was just like palpable. You know what I mean? And I knew that I wasn't that, like, I'm always the type of person, like, I'm always joking, I'm always laughing, but I didn't feel like people saw me the way that I saw them. And I wanted people to see me the way that I saw them. And so, although I started going to church in my mid 20s, I didn't get serious about it and actually sold out for Christ and starting to live according to the way that the Bible tells us to live, and really desiring to make decisions in my life according to what the Bible tells us until my 30s. So in my early 30s was when I really got serious about understanding the Bible better. And in my mid 30s was by the time I got to my mid 30s, that's where I could say I wasn't just saved, I was sold out.
Amen. So now that's a crux of obviously from 30s to today, the future, where the episode's going. There's a lot that we're going to focus on. But let me back up quickly. When you said the gentleman you got pregnant with was older, how much older? 5 years, 20
8
years?
years. 8. He's 8 years older than me.
8 years. Okay. So like I grew up outside of Boston. Probably the average marriage, the gentleman was like 10 years older. It was a normal thing. So it wasn't like he was like 30 years older and you would
No,
have, okay.
no,
Okay.
we
So,
in jail because I was 18 when I got pregnant. So
yeah. I mean, if I was your father, I'd want to kill him. But I mean,
yeah,
I'm just saying it wasn't like a 40-year-old man or a 60-year-old
yeah.
man. Okay. And then the from when you got pregnant to now you're in your 30s, did you date seriously? Was it all casual? Did you get married? Like what happened in those years?
So when I moved to Memphis, I had left my son's father. And 9 months after moving to Memphis, he convinced me that he had changed and he wanted his family back. So he moved to Memphis. But it only took me a few weeks, maybe a month, to realize this joker ain't changed. And by now I've gotten a taste of the good life. So I'm out of here.
Gotcha.
so so in my 20s, I don't really know that I had a serious boyfriend, but I did date casually. Never been married. I will be 45 in December. I have not been married. I desire to be married. So if there's a good man that's out there that's looking for a good wife, I'm taking applications.
That'll be awesome. The Remarkable People podcast, the first wedding from our show.
Exactly. We'll do a huge broadcast. But
Now
anyway,
you got all our audience is primarily podcast listening, but you just got like 50,000 downloads of the YouTube channel now. They're just like click.
let's see what she looks like. But anyway, so no, I dated casually throughout my 20s. I really wouldn't say that any of my serious relationships came, until my 30s. But the Lord still has not blessed me with the one yet. So I've not been married.
Yeah, no, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just trying to frame up
Yeah.
the past and where you're going in the future. And then the last question about that time period before we move on is your son. So he's growing up. I didn't realize at first. So the father was involved in his life. And then once you got to Memphis and decided, no, this isn't going to work out, did he stay in your son's life or did he move away? What happened there?
He stayed in Memphis. He's still in Memphis now. He was not involved in my son's life to the magnitude of what you would think a parent should be. And if I'm being completely honest, there's times that I was glad that he didn't, because anytime you have to be concerned about what it is that they're going to expose them to, and he wasn't exposing them to just the most horrific things, but even just small things like, you drop my 5-year-old off and this is the music that you're listening to. The fact that you think it's appropriate for him to be in the car while you're listening to music that are using those types of words, you kind of, you wonder, like, do I want him in his life? Do I not want him in his life? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Is he going to feel like he's missing out? Whatever. So he became very involved in his life his freshman year of college. And on one hand, I was like, yeah, you get involved now that he is who he's going to be and everything that he has in him, myself and my father, have put in him. but he was a better person at that point. So if he was going to come along and be more involved in his life, my preference would be that he came along at a point that he himself was more evolved. And my son now is 25 years old. He also lives in Memphis, and he and his dad, have a pretty solid relationship.
Good. That is awesome. Because everybody, it doesn't matter how bad. I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday, and their grandfather is a legit cult leader.
Oh, wow.
But the thing is, you still love your grandfather.
Yeah.
You don't condone anything they do, and you really filter everything they say.
Yeah.
But you're going to love your mom. You're going to love your dad. God puts that in us innately. So when the mom and the dad and the family members come around, that's a beautiful thing. And it's something that I think you'll always have. Myself personally, I grew up with my dad, but I know him now. There's just this hole in your life until that gets filled. And even though God can do anything, that's still a natural compartment God put inside of you. And when it's empty, you learn to grow and overcome, but that's something that was supposed to be filled. So that's awesome. Your son's now getting that with your ex-boyfriend, whatever, his father.
He remembers the shortcomings. He actually posted something on Facebook around Father's Day that I was like, I hate that you have that memory. I hate that that's something that you actually remember, even though you were laughing about it when you shared the meme. But he was like, listen, I've forgiven him for all of that stuff. I don't hold on to grudges, and I don't even care anymore. That stuff happened when I was 5. I'm now 25.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. All right. So now you go to church, you get a real relationship with God. You're in your 30s. Where does your journey go from there?
I'm laughing because I'm thinking back about some of the things that I just told you and some of the things that I didn't tell you. And I'm like, oh, thank God for Jesus.
Oh, well, hey, if there's something we missed between birth.
Well, not anything major, but when I just think about some of the things that I did as a kid and, just crazy, some of the crazy things that I did, I'm like, oh, thank God for Jesus. They say somewhere, and I don't know if this is just something I heard growing up or if there really is a scripture that says this, but it says that the Lord watches after fools and babies. And I always say, whoo, thank Lord, because I thank God that he watches after fools and babies, because Lord knows I've been both.
That's awesome. So yeah, no, but if there's anything you want to talk about that lends to the story that'll help our listeners connect with you or to grow, you absolutely share it. There's no problem with that, Shayna. Like I said, but if not, we'll pick up in your 30s and move forward, and thank God we didn't discuss those other things.
Yeah, I can't think of anything significant. It was all just a bunch of stupid stuff like that. Like I said, some of the dumb things that I did in high school, like organize food fights and skip school. And, my best friend and I, who we've known each other since we were 6 years old, there were times and it was much safer, A, back then because of how long ago it was, and B, the fact that we live in a much smaller area, that we would get in the car with guys that we didn't know. And, just the dumb stuff that you do when you really either don't know any better or, don't care. But I just think back about some of those things, and I just say, woo, thank God for Jesus.
Yeah. And again, as a father, I'm thinking stranger danger. Don't do that.
Yeah. Please don't do that. For anybody who's listening, don't do that. I don't care if you do live in a small town. 2022, don't do that.
No, population's higher. Crazies are higher.
Yeah.
Percentage of crazies is higher. They're in public office and I want to beat them like a piñata. So do not go with strangers. Do not. I don't even think you should hang out with people closely and intimately till you know them for at least a year. Because people can hide for a while, but after that year point, there's something magical about people showing their true colors. And yeah, I would highly recommend before you get intimate, meaning emotionally, not just physically.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let anybody in your inner circle unless God ordains it for sure. Other than that, it's like, you're a nice person. Good to talk to you. But yeah,
I co-signed that 1000%.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. It's just the safe rule of thumb. My kids are teenagers, 19 and 18. I think they think I'm too harsh at times, but Lord willing, they're going to be safe. And 10 years from now, they'll look back like, oh, thank you, Dad.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But back to your story. So where do you go from there? 30s, everything's
30s and 40s. I'm well into entrepreneurship at this point. Like I shared at the beginning of the broadcast, I've always had an entrepreneur spirit. Back to pictures of myself at a yard sale with nothing but junk. I've always wanted to beat to my own drum. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So in 2007, I became a coach. I then went on to be a business coach. I then became a little bit more specialized and taught business owners how to land corporate sponsors and corporate contracts. I'm speaking all over the world. So yeah, by the time I'm in my late 30s, especially into my 40s, I'm still not in ministry, until within the last few years. But from my mid 30s to my early 40s, I'm knee deep in entrepreneurship, and I am just consuming and exuding all things business, sales, marketing, operations, finance. Like I breathe it and I eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
And talk about entrepreneurship, what that means to you, because some people, they feel like, oh, if I don't start a Fortune 100 company, that's not entrepreneurship. And other people are
Yeah.
like, oh, I can start selling Norwex on the side. No idea why that just came to my head, but I can start selling on the side and I'm an entrepreneur. How do you define entrepreneurship, and what steps would you take? You did take steps and you mentioned some of them, but if someone's listening now at the checklist, like, I've had this idea for a long time, I've had this desire for a long time, define entrepreneurship, and then how would you tell someone to start pursuing their ideas?
Absolutely. So, I won't get into, all of the differences that are in the different quadrants between self-employed and business owner. We'll just talk about entrepreneurship from more of a broad umbrella.
Yes, exactly. I wasn't trying to get you to, it's not like a, business intro 101.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it like that. I just meant the overall, how do you define entrepreneurship,
Right.
and then go from there?
So overall, the way that I define entrepreneurship is making money from what it is that you love at the basic level, and at a much more advanced level, growing it to the point that it makes you money, even if you're on vacation for 3 or 4 months. So that's my own personal definition of entrepreneurship. So if the question is, how do you start that? I say first start by finding what it is that you would do for free, because there's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of things that we're good at, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we're passionate about. And entrepreneurship, I don't care how you cut it, it's not easy. And so if you're picking something to create a business around just because you're good at it, or somebody tells you you should do it, then when the going gets tough, you're not going to have the tenacity to be able to keep going even when you don't feel like it. So find something that you're passionate about, find something that you would do even if you had to do it for free. But most importantly, find someone who has done something that is either the same as what it is that you want to do, or something very similar. Because unless you're doing something that is so futuristic, then you're going to be hard pressed to not find someone who has done something similar, or at least be able to find some information on Google. Why do I say that? Because there are so many things that you can shortcut the process to entrepreneurship if you'll let someone else's losses become your lessons. And then the last thing that I would say, and it doesn't matter if you're pushing a product or a service, is to only focus on what you need to do in 90-day increments. I see so many people that are looking to start a business, and they start focusing on learning like Facebook ads and all this stuff that doesn't even matter. Like in the beginning, you just need the clarity around who do you serve, and how, what are their pain points? What are they looking to achieve? And what are the things that you're going to provide in order to be able to help those things. So I used to tell my business owner clients, I want you to be so dumb that you can't count past 90. So only focus on what you need to do for this 90 days. Yes, you'll have your sights set on the fact of like what your long-term goals are. But so many of us either do the right things in the wrong order, or we stay stuck because we don't know the how, where scripture tells us that the word will be a light unto our path. He never said we'd be a light into the distance. But if we take a step, then he'll light our path. If we take another step, he'll light our path. And after a few paths, you'll actually be into the distance. So don't do the right things in the wrong order, and don't stay stuck because you don't know what the right things are.
Yeah, and I think that's great.
Entrepreneurship 101.
Yes. And that is great advice, because a lot of people get hung up in the details and they just need to do. And
Yeah,
then you want to have that long-term vision and goal. But like you said, you need to break it down to small chunks. How
yeah,
do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
yeah.
It doesn't
And
matter
like I
how.
said, you're going out and you're learning, you're spending money on a sales coach and a marketing company, and you haven't gotten clear on your ideal client and all the things that come along with that. You don't know the difference between demographics and psychographics. And then you wonder why everything is falling apart. It's like trying to put a roof on a house that doesn't have walls and a foundation. Like, stop doing that. It's dumb.
And to echo that and take it a step further, I believe this 100%. I'm a marketing and sales consultant. I work with clients with successful businesses and who are in the middle of growing successful businesses. And probably 8 out of 10 of them have worked with other companies and they don't ask those questions. And it's like they're just happy to take their money and they're not really looking for results. They're looking for their profit.
And it's
So
not going to get you any results.
yeah, exactly. So if you're working with a company and they're not asking you these core questions, and you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
but if they're not starting the conversation, like, what's your ultimate goal? Where are you realistically at? So they can reverse engineer the plan for you to get there. That's not a company you need to be with. I mean,
Yeah.
Shayna, you echo in if I'm wrong or if I'm right, but what do you think?
You're absolutely right. And the only other thing that I would add to that is because then what happens is then you did then convince yourself that you missed it. You then convince yourself that maybe you shouldn't be in business, or maybe this is not the right kind of business. And it's not any of that. There's nothing wrong with you or your idea. You just didn't build like you would build your house, or you try to get help too late. I've seen so many people, they're like, oh, I don't need a business coach. I'll just figure it out on my own. I didn't build my house and then try to go find the architect that was going to give me the blueprint. So
Yeah.
then we sit here and we're like, oh well, that doesn't work, and business isn't for me. I guess I'll just go back and get a job. No, there's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with business. You just didn't build it in the way that it was intended to be built. And like you said, you had the right idea of, let me get someone to help me. But since I didn't know the order that I could build it in, and they recognized I didn't know the order that it could be built in, and now I went out and I spent $5,000 on something that was LMNOP when I needed to be spending $5,000 on figuring out A, B, C, and D.
Yeah. And I remember a good illustration of this is I remember being at a Chamber of Commerce event. There was like 75 business owners in there, and they're all convinced that mailing, mailers, physical US mailers are dead. There's no purpose for it. And then I'm like, okay, well, how would you market? And everybody's like, Google, Google, Google. Phew. So I pull up an oversized postcard from Google.
Yeah,
And I said, if Google's so great, why are they using? And the illustration was, all tools are good. It's just what tool is for the right job. And
yeah,
exactly what you just said. If somebody sent a mailer out, like, I got no results. Okay. Did you say the right thing? Did it look the right way? Did you hit the right demographic? Are the psychographics right? If your audience is mostly female, did it look masculine? I mean, there's so much to it. You gotta keep working until you crack the code, and
yeah,
then you repeat it. So
yeah.
yeah, you're tracking. So this is how you handle your clients. So when you're working with clients today, who is your, I guess I don't want to say ideal client, but who's the clients that you work best with, and what do you start the conversation off with them?
Yeah, so people still come to me for business stuff just because I was in the business streets so much longer than I've been in the faith-based streets, that people still know me for that. But everything that I do now, and this is skipping over, if we're going in chronologically,
Oh yeah,
it's
we're gonna go back. I'm sorry.
yeah,
We'll tie up the ribbon on
yeah.
the bow of the
Everything
business.
I do now is all faith-based. But when I think about who my ideal client is, it's a committed Christian. I'm not just looking for the believer. I'm not just looking for the person that says, yes, I believe there's a God. I'm not just looking for the person that, they may go to church. I'm looking for, and this is what I'm looking for in a husband too, for the husbands out there that are listening. I'm listening for a James 1:22 believer. What does that mean? James 1:22 says, don't just be hearers of the word, but also be doers of the word, because otherwise we're deceiving ourselves. So when I say that my ideal client, if you will, nowadays is a committed Christian, I want someone that doesn't just confess with their mouth that Jesus is Lord. I want someone that their life demonstrates fruit of the fact that they believe and live as though Jesus is Lord. So everything that I do in these faith-based streets now is all for Christians that consider themselves to be committed. I call it the saved and sold out.
Yeah. And that's how we should all be. But sadly, they're not. There's,
Yeah.
when Revelation talks about the end times and the churches and how most of them are a disaster and God wants to spew them out of his mouth. So, if you're listening to this podcast and you go to church and you're part of a religion, and I don't care where you are in the world or what religion it is, but if you go to church on the weekend and then live like the devil the rest of the week, you're probably a part of the devil. That's who your father is, the kingdom of Satan.
God is not looking for part-time custody.
Nope, not at all.
Full time. He wants to be full custodian of our lives, not just Sunday. That part-time stuff, he's not looking for you to be lukewarm. Pick one.
Exactly. And that's when our life's the best anyway. So that's the foolishness of man. It's like we have the most joy and the most peace and the most satisfaction when we're following God. And yet Satan tempts us with the counterfeit, the fake.
Yeah.
It's like God has this nutritious, wonderful tasting food and a feast. And Satan's like, hey, I'll give you this candy if you sell me your soul. And we do it. And then we feel like crap after eating the candy. So it's just trash. But let's go back. So now you are in business, you're working, you're helping people, you're growing, but then you transition into ministry. How do you get called into it? And what's it look like on the journey?
Yeah. So it's now 2018. And it would take me a minute to do the math, but I'm going to say I was 42, maybe, I don't know, 2018. I don't know. It's 2018 and everything around me dries up. So at this time, I'm running a business called Corporate Attraction with Shayna Rattler. I'm teaching business owners how to land corporate sponsors. I've just spent $32,000 on this whole marketing plan around this book that I just launched, and everything around me is drying up. It's now April, and I've only made a very small fraction of what I normally, make in a year. Everything, I think I had the anti-Midas touch, David. Everything I touched turned to dirt. People were hiring me for things that I had built a reputation for, and I just could not perform. Like, the best way I can say it is that everything I touched turned to dirt. And I go to Bible study this one Wednesday. And on the way to Bible study, I just kept sensing, even though nothing in my physical environment, nothing that I saw with my natural eyes was indicating this, I just said, I feel like the Lord is up to something. I don't have any idea what it is, but I just feel like the Lord is up to something. So I get to Bible study and I sit down and my pastor walks out. And the very first thing he says before he starts anything else is it just me, or does anybody else feel like the Lord is up to something? Well, if I could have gotten my shoe off fast enough and it would have been appropriate, I would have thrown my shoe at him, because I was like, yes. In my book, in the introduction, the very first thing I say is, what the hell is going on? I think that those are 6 words that people of faith, everybody really, ask themselves at one point or another. Like, why is everything around me drying up? Like, I'm hiring all the people, I'm doing all the things. At this point, I've been in business since 2007, and I know how to grow a coaching company. I've not only done it well for myself, I've coached other people to land $3 million contracts. Like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm the girl that gets the vision board and decides what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, and I make it happen in that order, right? And so it's like, why is nothing working? Why is it that everything works until nothing works? And so the very long and the short of that was because I was being called to ministry, and the Lord was telling me, all of the gifts, the talents, and the abilities that you've been using to build the marketplace, I now want you to take those same attributes and I want you to use them to help me build the kingdom. And, to back up to what I said maybe 20 minutes ago, I didn't grow up in church. And so I was like, minister, like, I'm the least likely. First of all, as much brown liquor as I drank and as many cuss words as I said and didn't go to Sunday school, how in the heck am I going to minister to anybody, right? But, he says he'll take the things of the foolish to confound the wise, and he'll even use a donkey, you know what I mean, to accomplish what it is that he wants to accomplish in the earth. But so that was my aha moment as to why things were drying up in my life, because I knew that I was being called to ministry. But at that point in 2018, David, I had no idea what it was going to look like or what it was going to consist of.
And then, so how did it come to pass? Like,
Yeah.
what did it look like?
Well, I first made a massive mistake that I don't want anybody listening to make. So it's now April of 2019, and I am on a spiritual retreat in Bali, Indonesia. And the Lord shows me so vividly, like I could see a split screen. Like you and I are on Zoom right now, and you're on one side of the screen and I'm on the other side of the screen. I could see it that clearly. That he told me that my ministry was going to consist of three things. He said, you'll preach and teach in stadiums, you'll have a television show, and you'll use your gifts with celebrities and politicians. Now, here's the grave mistake that is so easy to make. I took that new vision and I filtered it through old perspective. What does that mean? You heard me say that I had been in the coaching world since 2007. So anytime we've been in a certain industry, a certain amount of time, or we've done something a certain way, we see everything through that lens. So even though the Lord said stadiums, television shows, celebrities, and politicians, I said, well, you know what? I know that he's the God of all gods and he can do anything and he can make it happen like that. But I also figured it probably wasn't very likely that by the time I got back to Dallas, that was going to be the case. So what did I do? I created a coaching business out of it. And so everything that I did for the remainder of 2019 and all of 2020, it was good and it helped people, but it felt way too small. I knew that the anointing and the gifting on my life was way too big for a 5-day challenge, a coaching program, or any of that other crap, that I created. So I get on the phone. It's December the 29th or 30th of 2020. And I'm doing like all good business owners and good ministry leaders do. I'm like, what are the plans for 2021? And what needs to shift? Do I need to calibrate my message? Is it the marketing? Is it the audience? Like what is it that needs to recalibrate? And I'm writing out things and I'm balling up the paper and I'm throwing it around. If you could see my house, I literally had balled up legal pad all over my house. I'd rained yellow confetti all over my house. And I was like, this isn't working. And I'm not getting any more clear to what this big thing is that I know God has for me. So I put out an SOS to two of my best business accountability partners. And I said, would y'all have like 20 minutes to get on a Zoom with me tonight? Well, an hour and a half into the 3-hour Zoom, one of them says to me, well, what did he tell you were going to create? And I said, stadiums, television show, da, 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 da. And she says, well, even though we know that what did she say to me? She said, you didn't even give him a version of the vision to bless. He told you stadiums, television shows, celebrities, and politicians. And you didn't even say to yourself, like, well, let me start a television show on YouTube and see what that turns into. So he's telling you this thing and you're way over there. You didn't even give him a version of the vision to bless. Like, that's what we need to be looking to create. And I said, okay, great. I said, but here's my problem that I'm still not understanding. And I didn't have the language for it at the time, but I was looking for something that was like movement worthy. I was like, I'm not looking for a tagline. I'm not looking for a program. And I said, and I'm always saying, like, if you're going to accomplish this, that, and the other thing, like a God shift is required. And Doreen said to me, that's it. Like, I'll send you an invoice later, but that's it. A God shift. Like, that's something for the masses. That's something that'll fill a stadium. Like, that's something that can be an entire movement. So in pure Shayna fashion, because I'm like 0 to 100 real quick. I'm like you. I'm either smoking a cigar or I'm in the Indy 500, right? Yeah. And so I rebranded everything as a God shift. I wrote a book within a few days, called a God shift. I changed all my platforms to a God shift. And from then we've been off to the races. I've had a television show, I had a radio show, I've got my podcast. And I'm working with committed believers, teaching them how to unlock their kingdom authority, collide with God's purpose, and move into a greater destiny.
That's fantastic. Now, for the listeners, we all have different, again, skills and abilities. We all have a different calling. We all have a different role. Like, I love my heart, I love my kidney, I love my spleen, but they do different things. Yeah. For the people trying to identify what God has for them the next mission, and then to also get started. What advice do you have for them, Shayna?
Three pieces of advice. Number one, I just want to share a few of the indications of what God's will for your life might be. Number one, I believe that where your passions and your frustrations intersect, I believe that that's where your purpose is buried. So when you think about the things that you love and you think about the things that drive you crazy and that you would change if you could, I think that that's a real good indication of your purpose and God's will for your life. If you think about where people are always asking you, like, can I pick your brain? They're coming to you for advice for certain things. I think that all of those are indicators of what God's will is for your life and what you should start. The second piece of advice that I would give you is I would ask you to think about what it is that you can do in the meantime, because there's almost always a gap between promise and provision. And so, what do you do with the process in the meantime? Number one, I want you to ask yourself, what are you making space for? So, if our physical environments are full of clutter and they don't, like, say you're a man and you know you want to have a wife. When you look around your house, do you even have space for a wife? Right? If your mental capacity, if you're emotionally, spiritually full of clutter, like, you're not making space for what it is that you want to attract. And you're also not making room for God to perform a miracle. So that's the first thing that I would say that you do in the meantime. The second thing that you do in the meantime is steward what you have in your hands now. So for some of you, it might be, I want a house. I need to keep the one I got now clean. For some of you, it may be, I know that the Lord showed me bigger platforms, and until they're here, will I open my mouth and get on Instagram and share what it is that I'm studying or what the Lord is saying to me? Will I at least start a blog? Will I at least start posting things? So number one, what are you making space for? Number two, what are you how are you stewarding what you have in your hands now? And then thirdly, I'm going to go back to the example that we gave during entrepreneurship. Find someone who has done what you have done and sit at their feet and spend the money to sit at their feet, get in their programs, take their courses. There's no sense in you figuring this out on your own when, again, you can let someone else's losses become your lessons. But don't do what I do. Like, don't sit down and try to do it all in 3 days. One of the things that I think I should have said when you were talking about some of the things that you do, when you said everything works, you just have to work it. Too often, whether it's in business or ministry, we go a mile wide in all the different things that we're doing, and that only enables us to go an inch deep. So, for example, if you want to start a podcast, go a mile deep in podcasting. Learn everything that you can learn about podcasting. Put all of your effort and your resources into podcasting. Then decide whether or not it's not working or whether or not you want to do something else. But don't try to write a book, start a podcast, learn how to speak, create an online curriculum, start a membership program. Like, it's just stupid. Like, don't go a mile deep and then only go a mile wide and an inch deep, because you're not going to be effective in anything. So don't do like I do and try to do everything in 3 days. There's a grace on my life to do a lot in a short amount of time. And if you don't have that grace, don't do that.
Yeah, and that is self-awareness. I mean, God lives and helps us every day, and we need to make sure we're using the tools he gave us, because everybody has a different skill set and
Yeah.
everybody has different abilities, and not everybody's going to stand on stage and have a TV show.
Yeah.
But you may have personal ministry that's just one-on-one and incredible. So just work within your strengths God gave you. So I think that's great advice. So
on your level.
yeah, between your birth and today, Shayna, is there anything else we missed, or any key points or final thoughts you want to leave with our audience before we transition to where's Shayna today and where are you headed?
Absolutely. So, when I think about the questions that people ask me, or the issues that I see in the world, or the complaints that I see people posting about, I do believe that one of the primary reasons that we're not growing our faith or entering our destiny or overcoming adversity, whatever it is that we're looking to achieve or avoid, I believe that it comes down to identity and authority. We either don't know who we are or whose we are. We don't recognize that we have kingdom authority. And if we do realize that we have kingdom authority, and I can talk about what that is if you want me to go a little bit deeper, we don't know how to unlock it, for sure. And so I would say, what are you doing in your life to actually unlock your kingdom authority. The only reason, and sometimes this sounds a bit controversial, but go with me for a minute. The sole reason why Jesus was able to die, and I know you're already looking at me crazy, but the sole reason that Jesus was able to die was because the same power and authority that he had was passed on to us. That's why he said, greater things than these will you do because I'm going on to the Father. So for people who's sitting around like waiting on Jesus, he's not going to do anything else. He's done all he's going to do. He's now giving us the same power and authority to speak to things, to have what it is that we say we want to have, to heal the sick. So if you're wondering like why your life feels stagnant, I want you to ask yourself, are you actually walking in the authority that you have? Because it's a birthright.
Yeah. And so you just did a great explanation of what kingdom authority is. You have the authority to do the things that Jesus did for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And he talks about the kingdom of my Father that has not come. This earth is under the realm. Now, God owns it all and is in control of all, but right now it's a prince of the power of darkness. And you know what I mean? So this is not the kingdom. It says, in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as is in heaven. So don't be misled and live in this fantasy bubble as a Christian that we're in the kingdom. No, if we're in the kingdom, we wouldn't have all the crap every day. We wouldn't have ups and downs and misery. But when you're talking, Shayna, about the kingdom authority, how do people start unlocking and applying the kingdom authority?
Yeah. So write this down. Hopefully this is not the first thing y'all wrote down, but if it is, write this down. So here's my formula for unlocking heaven. It's the ABCs to unlocking heaven. The A is align. So let me just tell you the formula, then I'll back up and break it down. So it's align plus belief plus confession equals unlocking heaven. So align. We first have to make sure that we're aligned with God's will, his ways, and his word, right? B, belief. It's not just enough to believe that God can do it. It's not just enough to see that he's done it for other people, but you have to actually believe, number one, that he will do it for you and that you have the power to make it happen. And then C is confession. We actually have to speak what it is that we want to see until we see what it is that we're saying. I believe it's Isaiah 46:10, where the Lord is talking about the fact that he declares the end from the beginning. So wherever it is that you are right now, you actually have the power to declare God's word and declare I'm all for affirmations, but I love declaring God's word better than I do that I'm important and I'm special and I'm going to have great things. So when we have alignment and we have belief and we actually confess it, that's how we unlock heaven. And that's that's the simple formula to how you can actually release kingdom authority in your life. And when you do that, I will guarantee you that you will have more, that you will be more, and that you will do more.
Amen. And what you're saying about speaking truth is completely biblically based. For with the heart man believeth unto righteousness, but with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. Yes. So there's definitely a humility, there's definitely an obedience, and there's definitely a next level of trusting when you speak it. So, and then Jesus, how did he get rid of Satan in the garden? He spoke out loud. He quoted scripture to him. So if your whole Christianity is in your mind, you need to bring it out to reality.
Exactly. And then you have to persist until it happens. Don't say it for a week like, well, I don't have no more, I haven't done anymore, and I haven't become anymore. Persist until you see it happens. That's the hard part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's hard. It's our impatience and lack of vision and faith, right?
Patience. Oh my God. Patience is my 4-letter word. Like I hate being patient, but when I talked about there's almost always a gap between promise and provision, that process that's in the middle takes some patience.
Yep.
that I don't yet have. Like if I'm just being 1,000, if I'm keeping it 100 with you, I don't even know if that's what the young folks say anymore, but if I'm keeping it 100 with you, that's the thing that I struggle with the most is being patient for God's timing. I talk to God like a gangster. I'm like, what we doing? Like, why you keep telling me what I can have and it's a decade later and I still don't have it? Like, you know what I mean? So yes, you have to have patience in the process, but don't ask me. I can give you the scriptures to tell you how to be more patient, but that's the one thing that I've yet to master as much as I would like.
All right. Well, Shayna, we have heard your story. You share with us a lot of great insights for life. Where are you today and where are you heading?
Yes. So where I am today is stewarding what I have in my hands now until the big gifts come. The Lord has shown me, and it has been confirmed in my life by more than one person and in multiple ways, that the Lord is going to use me mightily in media. So I'm currently, using my own media platforms and obviously doing podcast media like this. But I do believe, and I know as sure as I know that my name is Shayna Rattler, that you are going to see me exactly where he told me. It's not going to be in television shows that I'm bootstrapping and self-funding, but you'll see me on some big screen, whether it's reality TV and or seeing it. Like, I don't know exactly what the platforms are going to be, but I do know that more major networks and publishing deals and media deals are what are in my future. And so you can just trust that I'll be consistent to steward what I do have in my hands now until those specific doors open.
Well, if someone's looking to contact you for information, for coaching, maybe to help open those doors, or if they're interested in you for conversations for that marriage, right? What is the best way for them to reach you?
Oh gosh, that makes me blush. Can I give a free gift? Can I give your audience a free gift also?
Oh, 100%. And the links to what you're going to say, we'll put in the show notes. The link to contact you will be in the show notes, but absolutely, what's the free offer and what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so it's a free guide and it's called When God Says Shift, because I believe that there's a greater level of destiny that awaits every single one of us, whether things aren't going well or whether you've experienced everything you've accomplished, but yet you know that you have greater expectancy for more possibility, more whatever. And so I created a free guide called When God Says Shift. And inside that guide, I actually share the 4 shifts that are required to actually move in to everything that it is that God has for you. And you can get that at godsayshift.com. That's godsayshift.com. But we're a God shift everywhere. So whether you want to know more about what we're doing ministry wise, the website is a God shift. If you want to follow me on social media, I highly recommend Instagram the most, because that's where I am the most active. And we are at a God shift there as well. You can inbox me questions. Even though I have team, I answer my own emails and I answer my own inboxes. So you can find us at a God Shift, and you can also message me for questions that you have there, opportunities that you have for us. And if I'm not the person to make it happen, if it's my publicist or somebody else, I'll be happy to tell you right there. So slide in the DMs, whether you've got opportunities or whether you think you are my opportunity, just slide in those DMs at a God Shift.
All right. Well, Shayna, it's been great talking with you today. Is there a final thought you want to leave with our community or anything we missed in your life to date?
I just want to kind of leave with a charge is that, God needs the best version of you on the right path now. And every day that we don't access the wisdom and information that we need is a delay that we're actually delaying to answer the amazing life that is calling. So starting today, I want you to exercise your kingdom authority so that you can, confidently go into that next chapter, because I do believe that you can have more, be more, and do more, but you've got a role to play in making it happen. God is not going to just do you. He wants to co-create and partner with you.
That is well said. Thank you for sharing that. And to all of our listeners, our slogan, you just heard Shayna's awesome, remarkable story. And she just said and embodies what our slogan says. Don't just listen to great content, but do it. Repeat the good you need to repeat each day so you can have a great life in this world and, more importantly, for eternity to come. So if you need help, reach out to Shayna, reach out to myself. We'll do everything we can to assist you. but go forward, do what God's calling you to do, get the help you need to do it. Don't make excuses, exercise that kingdom authority, and then contact us and let us know how God's changed your life. And maybe you'll be on the next episode of Shayna's podcast or my podcast, right?
Yes.
So that's it. I'm Dave Pasqualone. This was Shayna Rattler. Shayna, thank you again for being here today.
It's been a blast. Thank you so much.
Yes. And to our audience, we love you. We'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.